It's the Friday before the beginning of the ALDS, so we have plenty of questions to get to next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, we're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about us and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by Booking.com. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Well, with it being a Friday, we do this every single Friday, and even though this is our 6th episode of the week, probably we'll only do 5 next week just because it ended up being a lot this week, but we had so much to talk about, and I knew we were going to have a lot of questions to get into before Saturday's Game 1 of the American League Divisional Series between the Royals and the Yankees, so didn't want to waste any time in getting that tweet out and getting everybody's questions in so we could answer them for you in a timely manner. And if you are that first-time listener and you don't see your question in this episode or I don't give you an answer, reach back out to me, direct message me, and I'll be sure to answer it directly in a quick manner. I don't want to let any questions go unanswered, especially in a week like this. So the first one we have comes from Stormy. Hey, Jack, my question is, do you think MJ is primed for a big series or is it just false hope? I do think the interesting thing about MJ Melendez is in a series like this, I actually think he has a good chance of giving you something offensively. You have the short porch in right field. He's got a ton of power that can go to right field. And I think defensively, I mean, he showed at Camden Yards he could handle, for the most part, that cavernous left field. Now, he had that misplay, but that wasn't so much about the dimensions. He's athletic enough. He's got a good arm. I think he's going to get some run in left field this series. And it's kind of a coin flip to me whether Tommy Pham or MJ Melendez will play more. I think they definitely like MJ Melendez's defense out there in left more than Tommy Pham's. But offensively, I don't know if he's going to have that big of an impact because why would I have any reason to believe he can? I think you get a couple hits here and there. Maybe he even runs into one in homers. I mean, that's why they have him in the lineup. He's had 17 home runs this year, despite having a down year offensively. So there's nearly 20 home run pop. And probably ceiling-wise, if he did have a good offensive year, you're looking somewhere around 30 home runs. Now, that's all shoulda, woulda, coulda. I probably shouldn't have even said that. But they like what his bat could bring. However, there's a lot of strikeout guys in that lineup. I know for a fact he's not playing on Monday night. That's Carlos Rodon on the bump, and he's not going to be facing a lefty. So that'll be a Renfroe and Pham type game. But on Saturday night with Garrett Cole, I think the Royals will have him in there. Just going to be a tough matchup for him because Cole can get anybody out, whether they're from the left or the right side. So I don't know if I'll go as far to say he's primed for a big series, but I could always be wrong. October baseball is random, and sometimes the most random players can have the biggest series. Okay, the next question we're going to get to here comes from X, and if I missed anybody on YouTube, please just reach back out to me, and I'll answer your question as soon as I can. Waka Season asked, how do you think Michael Waka will fare in Game 1 in New York? In parentheses, he puts, it's Walktober. Well, that's the first time I've heard this nickname going into the playoffs. I don't remember any nickname like that for Waka in St. Louis. Probably was, though. I just didn't follow the Cardinals closely enough. I love it, though. Love the nickname going into tomorrow night. And if he does pitch well, we're absolutely going to be calling it Walktober the rest of the way. He's got great numbers against the Yankees and some of the best hitters in the Yankees lineup. Anthony Rizzo's one guy that has really done damage off of him, but I don't see him playing. So Aaron Judge, not great numbers. I don't believe Juan Soto does either, nor Giancarlo Stanton. So those are some of the heavy hitters in that lineup. But I don't think the Royals are going to be looking at Waka to go super deep into this game. You've got a ton of rest with that bullpen. The bullpen did a lot of the heavy lifting in game 2 of that series against Baltimore. And I think you can expect the same going into Saturday night. I mean, if Michael Waka can give you 5 innings, that's good enough for me. If he's cruising and he gives you 6 or 7, all the better. But we also have to acknowledge this is playoff baseball in the Bronx. It's a damn good Yankees lineup, and you can't get too greedy with your starter. If Michael Waka gives you 5 solid innings and he's at 85 pitches, I'm turning it over to the bullpen, which has been so good in the first 2 games of the postseason. So I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for him. That goes without saying. But if you can pencil him down for maybe 5 innings of 2 or 3 earned runs, I like that stat line. The Royals offense is definitely going to need to give him, though, some of that run support early on in this game. I think if you get Waka a 2 spot in the first couple of innings, you can expect him to cruise and pitch with a lead. If he's constantly having to duel it out with Garrett Cole, in a scoreless game or a 1-1 game, I'm going to give the edge to Cole for the rest of that outing. So to me, get 5 innings out of Waka, keep it 3 runs or less, and you're going to have a shot off of that Yankees bullpen late in the game. But it also means your Royals bullpen has to go a little bit deeper into this game because it's going to be a tougher environment, tougher dimensions to pitch in, and a lineup that I think has far more star power than the Baltimore Orioles did. Next question we have comes from Sam. Give me your insane MJ guess on what he does in game 1. Well, a lot of people are riding the emotional high of MJ Melendez, maybe because he had that 1 hit to close out his series in Baltimore. If I was going to give a insane guess, if it's just a guess and you're not holding me to it, I'll say he homers. I'll say that he, can hit one high enough and just far enough to the short porch in right field that he can maybe homer off Garrett Cole. I just don't want to hold my breath on it because, that's such a hot take for a guy that has been ice cold for a long, long time. But you said insane MJ guess, so I'm going to go home run. I think the dimensions of this park favor left-handed bats or right-handed bats that can go the opposite way with a lot of power. Salvador Perez, to me, is really the only guy that can do that consistently. MJ, though, man, I'll go with that hot take that he homers in game 1 because you did say game 1 and not just the series. Game 1, if I'm throwing out an insane take, I'll say that he homers. This one comes from Sports. Feel like Dayton had a specific way of building a team over years, keeping them together. He would be patient. JJ appears to know how to put a team together, hold players accountable, and be transactional. Totally different approach that feels more long-lasting and modern. Do you agree? I think what's great about this current era of Royals baseball is the Royals, basically brought in an entire new team for 2024, and it worked out successfully. I mean, there's no way to deny it now. You win a playoff series, you go from, 106 losses to 86 wins, a 30-win improvement, and you do it by not breaking your back financially. This showed that J.J. Picollo can find the right guys, and this scouting department can find the right guys, whereas Dayton Moore was very much putting his faith in the guys he drafted. And I think J.J. Picollo puts faith in guys that he drafted, but also acknowledges that team needs help. We need to give them a little extra boost here. We need to give them a little extra boost there. And that's what we saw by adding to the bullpen, adding to the rotation, giving them a few bats, even past the trade deadline. And yes, I do believe that is a better recipe for having winning baseball consistently. Does that mean you'll win World Series after World Series? No, but nobody does that. It's hard to win a World Series in this sport, but by getting multiple opportunities to get into the postseason, I think J.J. Picollo does a better job of that than Dayton Moore. Now, it's also 1 year, right? J.J. Picollo has to show next year he can basically do the exact same thing where Dayton Moore in back-to-back years had that team go to the World Series, and he won one of them. So that's next on the docket for J.J. Picollo. You have 5 good years of baseball, you certainly are going to earn that title. But I think in a short turnaround, a quick turnaround, JJ's better at building a roster and being more transactional, where right now the long-term approach, Dayton Moore and the scouting department did a better job of that by who they were able to go trade for, draft, and build a really good team. But I do think that, the jury's still out for J.J. Picollo because he's only been, the acting GM or the president of baseball operations for 2 seasons. But he also turned around a 106-loss team and took him to the second round of the playoffs in 1 year, where Dayton Moore, took a little bit longer. Let's all be honest. It took a lot longer to build a winning team. So that's kind of how I view it right now. Bobby Litt Jr. asked, which scares you more, Orioles roster or Yankees roster? I mean, hands down, it's the Yankees roster. When you got Aaron Judge and Juan Soto back-to-back, I mean, that's a gauntlet to go through. And then you got to worry about Gleyber Torres. You got to worry about Austin Wells. You got to worry about Stanton. You got to worry about Jazz Chisholm. There's so many bats in that lineup that just have immense power. And you're playing in a ballpark that a fly ball, a measly fly ball, can cost you runs. And that's what's worrisome to me. The good thing is Michael Waka, Cole Reagans, and Seth Lugo all have really good numbers against guys in this Yankees lineup. And it's a different atmosphere. It's a different part of the season. You can't really take away too much from what we saw in the regular season in Kansas City and in New York. So, yes, I do think the Yankees lineup scares me more just because they've got guys that are much hotter in that lineup than Baltimore really had. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, still a lot of questions to get to next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in TonaI. It's the world's smartest and most effective strength training system that helps you get stronger. Powered by AI, TonaI learns with every rep so it can deliver workouts personalized just for you. It's like having a personal trainer at home with you, as TonaI will optimize every workout just for you. Unlike traditional gym equipment, TonaI uses adaptive digital weight to advance your training techniques. From professional athletes to a mom of 3, TonaI is trusted by thousands who have become their strongest. Right now, TonaI is offering our listeners $200 off your purchase with promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's TonaI.com and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off on your purchase. Again, that's TonaI.com with the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for $200 off on your order. Still about 20 or so questions to get into from the listeners. And if you still have a late arriving one, just, again, send it directly to me. Or if I missed any of them, send it to me. I'll answer as soon as possible. Alex's question is, do you think this series can reignite the Royals-Yankees rivalry? It's tough now in baseball to really spark a rivalry when you don't play that team as often. But we saw this happen in 2015 with the Blue Jays. But the Blue Jays also stemmed from the regular season of Jose Bautista and Josh Donaldson and Alcides Escobar. And there were guys that were plunked intentionally. And the Royals and Blue Jays didn't like each other. But that also went away once the Royals stopped playing the Blue Jays in meaningful baseball games. I think this would more so be about the Yankees, because the Yankees don't have any reason to dislike the Royals unless the Royals knocked them out of the postseason. And then it would more so be a thing for next year, because I just don't see anybody outside of Tommy Pham, really, just because Tommy Pham's a bad dude and he's not afraid to speak his mind and show, you know, what he can do with his fists. But there's nobody else on that Royals team that I think really screams a trash talker or wants to fight somebody or get into a brawl. And I think that would be the only thing, is what I'm getting at, that would ignite something. If there's chirping, if there's trash talking, we saw in the Mets-Brewers series, it was Jesse Winker and Willie Adames, I believe, that were jawing at each other, and that went on all series. So it would take somebody jawing at somebody to ignite something. But right now, I'm going to say no. I don't think these teams are going to get into a shouting match. They just don't have a lot of guys on their team that have that sort of quick trigger at getting pissed off, and they want to fight somebody or they want to trash talk somebody. I mean, Bobby Witt is very reserved. Salvador Perez, if somebody crosses a line, will start chirping back at somebody, but it would take somebody else doing something. I wouldn't see Vinny doing that, not Massey, not Kyle Isbell, not Hunter Renfroe. You know, these are guys that I just think want to stay locked in, stay focused, and remain consistent with their goal, which is moving on to the ALCS. And the only way they can do that is not letting another team get inside their head. And I'm sure the Yankees are thinking the exact same way. So as much as people want to hear it, I just don't think this is going to look like the late 70s and 80s, because baseball is also a lot different than it is this time around. This one comes from Bobby. Why do people from the Northeast suck so much as human beings? Thanks for my question on the podcast. Yeah, that's kind of my issue with doing this Mailbag Friday. I never look at the questions beforehand. So sometimes I read things and it's already going out there. Yes, I could cut it out, but why should I? Because these people took the time to ask a question. I am curious with the Yankees fan base and those on the East Coast, what they think about the Royals and their fan base. I mean, the NFL side of things, people don't like Kansas Cityans because of the Chiefs. But for the Royals, they're going to have most of America rooting for them. So I'm not going to comment on East Coast people because I got relatives that live up in the East Coast, though they're Red Sox fans and not Yankees fans. So they share that same sentiment of not liking Yankees fans or people from New York. And I know that New York people and Boston people know all about that. But to me, I can't speak to it too much. I think it's just bias, right? If you're from the Midwest, you're from the South, you probably don't like people on the East Coast and vice versa. So we'll definitely see that type of rivalry, at least with fans coming to opposing stadiums over the next few days, what they think about each other, what Midwesterners think about East Coasters, and what East Coasters think about Midwesterners. KC Sports Connoisseur asks, we know Waka and Reagans are the Game 1 and Game 2 starters, and I would think Lugo would be the Game 3 starter based on the days off and travel days in between games. Is it realistic that if the series went all 5 games, we could only see those 3 make starts? And is that the move you could see? Yeah, I think that's what it's going to be. It'll be Waka Game 1, Reagans Game 2, Lugo Game 3, I'd imagine against Luis Gil of the Yankees. And then Game 4 and Game 5 would go back to Waka and Reagans on regular rest. I do not think there's any scenario in which Singer or Lorenzen or Marsh, if he got added to the roster, which he hasn't been, would be making a start. So to me, I think those 4, your best 4, are the only ones that are going to be starting in this series. David has the question of, this isn't about the series necessarily, but why were the A's willing to trade 4 or 5 controllable years of Lucas Erceg? Seems those are the kind of guys the A's and other small market teams should build around. The only thing about Lucas Erceg is that he was more of a late bloomer, right? He was 28, 29 years old. And yes, he had a lot of years of control, but let's be realistic. How far away are the A's from winning? And what the Royals failed to do last year with Carlos Hernandez, a guy with years of control, was young, had good numbers, they decided to hang on to him. And Carlos Hernandez could barely stay in the big leagues this year. My point being, relievers have short shelf lives in Major League Baseball. I mean, they fall off pretty quickly. So as much as I would like to say Lucas Erceg is going to be the Royals closer for 6-7 years, this is not going to be the case. Now, Wade Davis was this team's closer from basically 2014 to 2017, and then tailed off after his time in Chicago. I mean, he went to Colorado, tough place to be a good pitcher, but relievers, they don't really stay dominant for years and years. Oakland knows they're a long ways off from winning, and they tried to capitalize on getting 3 prospects back, which I didn't think were bad prospects. I liked Will Klein. I like his upside. Jared Dickey, I liked as a good bat, and Mason Barnett was one of the top Royals pitching prospects. But I don't think the Royals feel bad at all about losing those prospects because Lucas Erceg has been so damn good for this bullpen. Charles asks, if we beat the Yankees in this series, does that push Witt over Judge for MVP, or is it decided already now anyway? Yeah, I think it's going to be Judge's to lose at this point. I don't think any matchup in the postseason is going to dictate that because Bobby also struggled toward the last half of the season, or more so the last month of the season. I need to, correct that real quick. But Aaron Judge, he kind of did, but he also put together one of the best offensive seasons we've ever seen, really since Barry Bonds did so. But I think it's wrapped up at this point. But I don't think Bobby Witt Jr. is focused on it too much. If he outplays Aaron Judge and the Royals win the series, that's all that matters. I mean, Aaron Judge could win the MVP if that means the Royals can move on to the next round. Coach Allen asks, do you think the Royals offense can provide any type of lift to the pitching staff? I want to believe, but they have scored 29 runs in the last 14 games, so it's hard to be optimistic. We also had to factor in, too, you're facing the best of the best in October. You're not getting the long reliever. You're not getting the 4 or the 5 guy. You're getting number 1s, number 2s, and number 3s. I mean, Corbin Burns and Zach Eflin are damn good. And we can't acknowledge the offense struggled toward the end of the regular season, but they also were without Vinny Pasquantino. Now that he's back, I think this offense can get a boost. It's just about correcting some things against some aces out there. Garrett Cole's an ace, right? Carlos Rodon had the Royals number this season. You look at Luis Gil, really, really good. So putting up big-time numbers, easier said than done, but I do think they're going to have an easier time in New York because of the dimensions of the ballpark, right? For right-handed hitters in Baltimore, you couldn't hit the ball out. It's kind of short all the way around at Yankee Stadium, so I think we can see some of those right-handed bats use that power to left field. But in that same conversation, we got to talk about the Yankees being able to do the exact same thing. So I think they'll have a better chance just because of dimensions, but also an elite rotation they're going to be going up against. Kyler asks how many playoff innings or batters in the playoffs before the series in Baltimore started this year's Royals pitching staff complete. I think you're asking how many playoff innings or batters in the playoffs before this series in Baltimore started. had this year's Royals pitching staff completed. Okay, so now I got it. I read that incorrectly. I believe Waka and Lugo were the only ones, right? Because Waka and Lugo have pitched in the postseason. Lugo out of relief for the Mets. Waka's had tons of experience. Reagan's has not. Singer had not. And Lorenzen had for Philadelphia out of the bullpen. And I think that's it. I'm not missing anybody. Marsh certainly didn't. So really, you look at Waka and Lugo as the guys that were able to get the bulk of those postseason innings. But Waka's been the most consistent guy starting postseason games. And that's why I think they feel very confident he can be a game one starter in New York against the Yankees. All right, we'll take our final break of the show. When we come back, we will answer all the remaining questions next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Our last sponsor we want to give a shout out to is Booking.com. Explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your rival city during the postseason. Maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition stadium cuisine. Luckily on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's right just for you. With Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the U.S., you can go incognito to all of your rivals' cities. So Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your home teams or your rival's stadium. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even that hated rival. So book today at Booking.com. Booking.yeah. We still have a lot to get into here. I've gone a little bit long-winded on some of these questions, so I don't want to leave anybody out. First one comes from Dominic. So, Locked On Royals watch party for Saturday. I'm still TBD on where I'll be watching this game, but if I run into anybody, I don't have anything planned yet. So, I wish I would be able to do that. Maybe down the road in the postseason. If we get something going, I'll tell where I'm going to watch the game, and I would love to see any listener out there that wants to drink beer and watch the Royals win a playoff game, hopefully. But for Saturday, don't have anything planned just yet. Maybe, though, if something happens for Game 4, Game 5, we can get something sorted out. Nick's question is, amongst many others, 3 crucial plays happened yesterday, in my opinion. I think speaking of Game 2 in Baltimore, Michael Massey's diving stop, MJ's catch, and Serpa with the swing and miss, hit by pitch on Cowser. Which play out of those 3 was the most important to the outcome of yesterday's game? To me, it's Serpa and the strikeout, because if Colton Cowser doesn't swing, I think that game unravels. I think that Serpa, knowing that he had a 1-2 count, just let a sinker slip away from him. It's now 2-1. He knows that his command maybe isn't as sharp anymore, and then it's one more base hit and that game's over. Honestly, 2-1 for Baltimore might have been enough with the way the Royals offense had looked. So to me, Massey's play was incredible, but also the Orioles scored the next inning. MJ's catch was great, but both those things happened before that outing by Serpa, and Serpa finding a way to get out of that was huge. And he got some good fortune from Colton Cowser just deciding to swing before the pitch, basically. And to me, that was the biggest play because it turned into an out instead of a run. No Name has the question, what are the Royals' keys for winning this series, and how much do they challenge Soto and Judge? I would hope that the Royals don't challenge Judge or Soto unless they have to. And that would mean bases loaded. I mean, there's nowhere to put him, right? You still try to get him to swing outside the zone. You don't want to leave him a cookie. But to me, I think it's all right to work around him with the base open, whether it be to lead off an inning, like don't intentionally walk him, but also don't give him any pitches to hit because they can do the most damage out of anybody in the lineup. I said this yesterday. Let the others beat you. Don't let Aaron Judge, don't let Juan Soto beat you. In the same way the Yankees are saying, don't let Bobby Witt Jr. and don't let Salvador Perez beat you. So my keys, I think it's trying to play to this bullpen again. Give this bullpen a lead, hopefully more than just one run, but that's what they had to deal with in Baltimore. Play to this bullpen. Don't be afraid to pull the starters out by, the 5th inning or the 6th inning, because right now they've got a hot bullpen that has been pitching well for a month. It sounds crazy to me, but I think the Royals could be burned a few times where they leave in a starter too long because they didn't have that faith in the bullpen. Now they do. And it's not to just, live on the edge with that, but there's a lot of guys that are pitching well and can pitch well in a spot like this at Yankee Stadium, but they also need to acknowledge the fact that the three starters going in the first three games have great numbers against the Yankees lineup. If they're cruising, you don't need to worry about it. But I think Matt Quatrero played his bullpen very well in game two. I would like to see a similar recipe if a guy doesn't go too long into the game and use that same recipe used in game two against Baltimore. Shannon asked, what factor could Rust play for the Yankees? Could the Royals steal a game in New York if it is a factor? Absolutely. I mean, the Yankees haven't played in a while. They got all the pressure in the world. It can absolutely play a factor. And I'm honestly expecting the Royals to take at least one there. Do I think they win the series? I'm going to take an easy cop-out answer and say I want to see how Monday goes first, Saturday and Monday. But I think Rust can play a factor. I think one or two things happen. They look rusty right out of the gates, or they are ready to go, and they pounce on the Royals in the first inning. But with the way the Royals pitching staff has looked in bullpen, I think they can grab one game. That could absolutely bite me in the ass. I know that, but a part of my job here is to give some takes here. And one of my takes is to be a little bit optimistic. I think they can take one. And if they take one of the first three, they'll be guaranteed to have two games at Kauffman Stadium because there would have to be a game four. Born Rock Chalk asked, do you think the Royals could split the series in the Bronx? If so, what game? I think it would have to be game two because of Reagans. I don't think they have the pitching matchup as good as Waka has been in game one because Garrett Cole's a monster in October. And he is somebody you usually don't want to go up against. The only thing I'm holding out for is that Garrett Cole hasn't pitched a full season, and it's been a little bit wonky. Still really good numbers, though. You can't deny that about Garrett Cole. But if they do split, I think they would take game two with Cole Reagans on the mound. DJE said, I know you replied and said you didn't know what Wednesday's time would be, and that's totally fine and appreciate that. Do you have any idea, maybe from years past of the ALDS, what Thursday could be if there is a Thursday game? Do they favor the afternoon for that? Well, the people I've talked to, I believe what I can tell you on this is, knowing baseball in the past, they don't want to put the Yankees on the afternoon slate. They want the Yankees in prime time, which bodes well for the Royals. I got my tickets for Wednesday. I'll be out there. And right now I'm leaning toward it's going to be a night game. Again, this is just purely guessing, speculation. But in the past, I think almost always those big networks, which the Royals are going to be on TBS with Bob Costas and Ron Darling on the call, they're going to want primetime slots for the Yankees, especially with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and Bobby Witt Jr. So I'm going to be pretty surprised if both Wednesday and Thursday, if there is a Thursday game, would be afternoon games, because that seems silly not to put the Yankees on primetime television if you're trying to maximize viewership for postseason baseball. CWAA asks, I'm sure you'll get asked 20 times, but let's hear your lineup for game one against Garrett Cole. I think I'll go with what it was in Baltimore against Burns, which would be Massey, Bobby Witt, Vinny, Salvi. Was it Yuli then at that point? It was Yuli, and then MJ, Renfroe, Isbel, Garcia. I'm going to stick with that. If there was one change I would make, it'd be putting Tommy Pham in there over MJ. But from what Matt Quatrero did, he wants to have a lefty in there with maybe a little bit more pop off Garrett Cole if he can run into one in a big spot for the Royals, as MJ has done a few times this year. Royals Report has the question of, do we pitch around Soto or do we have to challenge him? All based on the situation. If it's the first inning, right, and Michael Waka gets the first out of the game, which I think it would be Gleyber Torres. I haven't been keeping up with who the Yankees have been leading off, and they haven't played in a while, so they can always change it around. Hell, the Royals let off Michael Massey instead of Tommy Pham, which caught me off guard right before the game on Tuesday, game one of the wild card series. But to me, if there's a base open, I'm just not letting Juan Soto or Aaron Judge beat me. If it's first and second and 2 outs, I would honestly look into who's hitting behind. Like, if it's Michael Waka on the mound and you look at who he can shine against, I think lefties, because of that changeup, has a really good chance to fool guys. But Juan Soto is not somebody you fool. I mean, he walks better than anybody in baseball, in my opinion. He can spit on pitches like that, and then he can crush the mistakes that you make. Cole Reagans made a mistake when he had the 2-run home run in that series in September. Michael Waka has made mistakes before with that changeup. So I wouldn't challenge him unless you absolutely have to in a certain spot. Because what did the Orioles do when they said Bobby Witt Jr. is at the plate? What do we want to do against him? They challenged him, and Bobby Witt Jr. made him pay. They let Bobby Witt Jr. beat them, and that's why they're sitting at home now. You don't let the MVP players beat you. You let the other guys beat you if you're trying to challenge them. But I would not try to challenge Juan Soto and Aaron Judge unless you have to in a certain spot. Michelle asked, what's the first thing you're going to do when you win the World Series? Go to Disneyland, of course. That would be my go-to. Just kidding. I don't think I've ever been to Disneyland. That's a hot take. But I would celebrate with a lot of liquid libations, a lot of beer. I think that's what I would do if the Royals won the World Series. Would celebrate and take maybe a day or two off of work. And I haven't told work that yet, but they can expect that from me. And lastly, Mike asked, does the entire 40-man roster get to travel to New York? I don't think so. No, it would just be the playoff roster and guys that were on the team and then are on the injured list. Like, I think Will Smith and Chris Stratton are there, to my knowledge, maybe still getting in some work. But no, the entire 40-man roster will not be traveling to New York. And they're already there. They were taking BP today and spoke to the media. So a much smaller clubhouse. And it's very similar to what they had in September with a lot of the same guys around there. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X. If you missed or you didn't see any of your questions here in this episode, I do apologize for not getting to them. Send them directly to me. You can do that to my Twitter account at JohnnyJ_15, or just re-up it on YouTube, and it should give me the notification, and I can answer it because I don't want to leave anybody out with as big of a weekend as this is going to be. Game 1 of the ALDS tomorrow night in the Bronx, 5:38. First pitch, 17:38. If you're on military time and you love the 2014 and 15 Royals, Michael Waka versus Garrett Cole should be a phenomenal atmosphere. Cannot wait for it all. Still figuring out where I'm going to be watching it, but it definitely will be out of my house because I want to be in the environment. But again, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Well, that's our 6th and final episode of the week. We will not have any until Monday because I'm going to take these next 2 days off just watching the game. But keep up with my Twitter account for anything I'm saying about the game or during the game. And on Monday, we'll have a full recap of what happened on Saturday and previewing Monday night's game where it'll be Cole Reagans and Carlos Rodon. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.